Hello everyone and welcome back to our single button guide. Today we're going to talk about the Arms Warrior. And as usually, we're going to go through the stats, the talents, we're going to show the rotation, and then showing a 10-minute gameplay, so kind of like just running through a dungeon, and then a quick summary. So in case you join for just a very quick summary on how this build works, together with the single button assistant, you can jump to the summary, or you can watch my 10-minute version of a guide. I have also a 10-minute version, like a short guide, but this one here is probably going to be like an hour because we're going to go through everything. So once you have watched this guide here, you will know everything that's going on for Arms Warriors behind the scenes, like everything that works in the talents, and yeah, just good old knowledge about the Arms Warrior and how it works. But let's get to it. So as usually, the first thing we're going to talk about is the stats. First of all, as I always say in all my videos, I highly recommend getting the highest upgrade level on your item. In case you don't know what I mean, if you look at your, for example, my shoulders, you will see here, if I look to take it down here, you can see my shoulders are the upgrade level called Veteran. You can see the third line on the item. Upgrade level Veteran. That means if I got another pair of shoulders, which was either Explore or Adventure, you can see here on the right side what eye level, upgrade levels they can be. If I got another pair of shoulders, which was Explore or Adventure, I would never use it. You are simply losing too much strength before it actually is worth using it. Like strength and all the main stats now, like agility, intellect, and strength and so on, is so much worth at the moment in the game. So I would never go down on an upgrade level. But what I would do is, if I got, for example, let's say I had an adventure and I got a veteran like this one here, then I would replace it ASAP. I wouldn't even look at the secondary stats. But the moment you get another veteran item, another veteran shoulders, that's when you look at the secondary stats. But if you got, for example, a champion shoulder, a hero shoulder, a myth shoulder, again, you swap ASAP, you don't even think about the secondary stats. Always go with the highest upgrade level. It doesn't matter with the 1 out of 8 and 4 out of 8, because you can always upgrade the item. What I mean is the upgrade level name. Veteran, champion, hero, myth. Always go with the highest one. Now that we are clear on that, then in case I got another pair of shoulders and it was a veteran item, I would start looking at the secondary stats. In this case here, we have critical strike, haste, mastery, versatility. So you might ask, why? So first of all, we have critical strike. So Arms Warrior is a bit of a slower base spec, but it has a lot of like high damage. Basically, critical strike increases the damage of our spell. Sometimes it has a chance to do the crit where it deals way more damage. Critical strikes also gives more rage, which is very nice. But one of the main reasons for why critical strike works so well with Arms Warrior is, of course, also because it's a bursty build. We're using a lot of burst, so it's nice when it does crits. But that's not the main reason. If you go into the talents, you will see, if you search on a crit, it has so many talents that increases the crit damage and also increases your crit chance. So a lot of talents in here is increasing the damage you do from crit, but also increasing your crit chance. So basically, we don't have normal crit damage like other, I can't remember if it's 150 or 200%. We have higher than that because we have so many talents that increases the critical strike damage and critical strike rating. So crit for Arms Warrior is just like such a good stat. Beside of that, we also have haste. Haste and critical strike for an Arms Warrior goes really well in hand to hand. So don't just try to get like a lot of crit. Try and get like a good amount of crit and haste. Haste increases the attack speed of our weapon, which of course is nice since we're using two-hand weapon. It reduces the global cooldown on our spells, and especially since we're using single button assistant, which has a 25% longer global cooldown, it's nice to get that one even longer down because we're getting the punishment from using single button assistant. Beside of that, it also makes your bleeds, since Arms Warrior is a build that has a lot of bleeds. It also makes the blades tick faster. Makes the attacks go faster. It gives more rage because, we're going to attack faster, which also just gives more rage in total. So very nice. And it just makes the entire rotation just more smooth overall. Besides that, we have Mastery, which is a bit fun. So Mastery is the one that actually makes you inflict the deep wound. It's the one that actually makes you, every time you use Mortal Strike, Warbreaker, Cleave, and Bladestorm, it inflicts deep wounds. So in my short video, the 10-minute video, I actually believe that Mastery would also increase the bleed damage from this one here. It turned out I was wrong, because the thing is, when I removed my Mastery ring, you can see right now it deals 332k bleed damage. If I take my Mastery ring off, it actually says now 319k, and I was like, oh, okay, it actually does do a lot with the bleed damage. But no, I was wrong, because if I remove my ring here, which doesn't have any Mastery, it also goes down in damage. Now it's 312. So the bleed damage itself doesn't have anything to do with the Mastery itself. It's kind of like it's all your stats. It's basically all your stats you have that increases that bleed damage, or maybe like eye level and so on. But everything you have on you is basically increasing your bleed damage. What Mastery actually does is the second thing here, increasing the damage the enemy takes from you. So that basically means the only thing Mastery does is increasing the damage the enemy takes from us, while it has, well, actually, more blah blah blah, inflicts bleed damage over 18 seconds and increase the damage the enemy takes from you by 27%. So I mean, it makes them bleed and makes them take damage from us, which is like fine, but since Mastery only increases that damage increase and how much damage they take from us, which technically, I mean, somehow also impact how much the bleeding is damaging, because those 27% of course also affects the bleeding damage itself, if you know what I mean. But it doesn't like increase the bleeding damage more itself. I got a comment on that and I confirmed that's true. So that is why Mastery is lagging behind Critical Strike and Haste, because it doesn't really make that bleed better, and it only increases the damage they take from us. But Critical Strike and Haste is such more better compared to what the Mastery actually gives you. Then we have Versatility, which is usually always the worst one. So get me right, Versatility is not like bad. It just increases the damage we do, it increases the healing we do, and it decreases the damage we take. So if you like to play solo content, just you doing delves, solo content and so on, Versatility is a great stat, because it will reduce the damage you take, increase the damage you deal, and increase the healing you do. So overall, it's a quite nice stat. But if you want to go into dungeons and do the top damage as number 1 DPS, then it's not really going to help you. It's more like helping you survive and deal damage at the same time, if you know what I mean. So again, always try to go with the highest upgrade level, and whenever you get an item that has the same upgrade level as you, then you should look at this priority here. Of course, the best thing is that you can try combine crit and haste, try to get a good amount of both crit, both haste, and then Master Versatility is not really something you need to focus too much on. But that's the stats. Then it comes to the talents. So we are using 2 different builds. We have the one we call the dungeon build, which is the one you're going to be using for any content. It's going to be for leveling, questing, dungeon, delves, open world activities, and so on. This build here should be the one you should normally go with no matter what. Then we have the raid build. The raid build is the one you only use for raid boss, where it's usually just the raid boss itself. Like, because the other build is doing so much more cleave damage. So for example, when you're doing Mana Forge, Omega, and you're playing against those like 3 Demon Hunter bosses, the dungeon build can actually sometimes do more damage, because we're doing a lot of cleave damage, especially when you take the bosses together. But the raid build is just so much better for like bosses like Dementius and like the first boss in Mana Forge Omega, bosses where it's just one boss, not much anything like else. You kind of know what I mean. So single target bosses, so plan to use this raid build here, which is using the Slayer. because Slayer is just a talent that is increasing the damage a lot from your execute, from your blade storm, even the set piece, the hero set pieces like from your tier set is increasing execute, blade storm, kind of like that. And then you have the dungeon build, which is just all about cleaving and also has some nicer survivability. But yeah, it's just like a better like all round one. But again, we're using the dungeon build for any content in the game, except when we're going into raids, and we just want to do a lot of damage to a boss, then we use the raid build. But for now, let's start talking about the dungeon build, and let's go through the warrior tree, the hero tree, and the spec tree over here on the right side. And then I'll gonna explain how everything in here works together. So let's start talking about the left side of the talent tree, the warrior tree, the class tree. First of all, we of course have battle stance and we have defensive stance. Usually it's not something you'd really have to think too much about, but the battle stance is increasing critical strike chance of your abilities by 3 and reduce the duration of movement and parrying effects by 10%. So that's the one you default want to like run around them. And then you have defensive stance, which reduces all damage you take by 50% and all damage you deal by 10%. So I mean, you can of course make keybinds to jump between these two stances, because I mean, if you're getting a lot of damage and you feel like I'm gonna die now or something like that, then of course you could jump into defensive stand and take, 50% decreased damage, wait till the healer heals you back, go back to battle stance and have 3% more critical strike. So that's of course something that's up to you if you want to do. I haven't really made a keybind for that down here, but it's up to you how you're going to treat that. But default, you should just always be in battle stance, because I mean defensive stance is reducing the damage you deal by 10%, which we don't like. Beside of that, we have War Machine. Your auto attacks generate 10% more rage, and also killing an enemy instantly generates 5 rage and increase your movement speed by 30%. It's very nice for like dungeons, leveling, questing, because it just keeps making you move faster and gives you more rage just passively. We also have rage increased by 3%, which means every time you deal damage, you will be getting 3% of the damage you deal back as self-healing, which is quite nice. We also have Impending Victory. It basically replaces Victory Rush. Victory Rush was usually a spell you could only use after you have killed someone. You could use it to heal you back. Now we can use the self-heal ability all the time because we have Impending Victory. So whenever you want to whenever you feel like you're losing a lot of HP, you can use it. It's going to heal you 30% of your maximum health, which is very nice. Deals 69k damage, which is okay. Killing an enemy that yields experience or honor resets the cooldown. So for example, if you just used it against someone, you kill them up, you can just use it right after that and heal you basically 30%, which is quite nice. Another reason why I pick Impending Victory is because I also pick Second Wind. If you take any of the meta builds, they are basically not using Second Wind. Like, no one is playing with Second Wind. I don't understand. I honestly feel like it's such an overpowered talent. Most people, they remove Second Wind and they take Spell Reflection, which I mean, I can understand why someone would play with that, because you can basically reflect a spell that is casted on you, which can be very powerful. But personally, I just love Second Wind because what happens it restores 6% health every 1 second when you have not taken damage for 5 seconds. So basically, you're doing a dungeon, you've taken a lot of damage, but now you haven't taken damage for 5 seconds, and it's going to heal you 6% of your HP every second, which is insane. Really nice leveling, dungeon questing, because you just keep healing yourself so much. The healer is going to love you. Also, restore 1% of your health every 1 second while you are below 35% health. So whenever you are below 35% health, it's actually just going to keep healing you 1% health. The amount restored is increasing the closer you are to death. So even the more you're closer to 0%, it actually heals you more. So it's just like a passive thing you don't even have to think about, and it just keeps you alive, which I like a lot. We even have as the Colossus build here, which is why Colossus is such a great questing dungeon build. We even have this one here. When your health is brought below 35%, you get a Second Wind, healing you for 12% of your maximum health over 2 seconds. which is insane. And this can only happen every minute. But basically now, when we get below 35% health, we are getting 1% healing every second until we get above 35% health. But now we also have this one here, which will heal us 12% of your maximum health over 2 seconds. Just like boom, which is quite nice. So this one compared with this one here, lovely. Then we also have Heroic Leap, nice spell to like jump out of fire. You know, it's nice spell to just kind of like get out of combat or out of fire. It's kind of like this, but I mean, in case you haven't seen it before, but you basically click where you want to jump and you jump to the selected area. Very nice. You can even like jump down from here and then use it just before you're landing, and you don't actually take fall damage, which is super nice. Then we also have Stormbolt. Stormbolt is only a spell we use in the dungeon build. We don't actually use it. Well, actually, we are using it in the raid build. I actually thought we didn't. I had forgotten that. But Stormbolt is basically a spell. We don't use it for like damaging, but like imagine this mob here was casting a spell that we don't want him to cast. Then I could use Stormbolt, interrupt it, and now it doesn't cast any spell anymore. We also, of course, have our Pummel spell, but Stormbolt is just an additionally, interrupt spell. I would have imagined we wouldn't use it in the raid build, but technically we are. But that's probably because we have everything else we need in here, so yeah. Then we also have, we already talked about Second Wind. We also have Forthing Berserker. Mortal Strike and Cleave have a 20% chance to immediately refund 10% of the rage spent. Nice. And then also Bounding Strike. Reduce the cooldown of Heroic Leap by 15 seconds, and Heroic Leap also increase your movement speed by 70%. Again, it's a great thing. Imagine a lot of like fire is under you. You really just want to get away from it. Then use Heroic Leap, and now you even run faster for 3 seconds, which is quite nice. We also have Pain and Gain. This one here is a talent I love it, but it's so with the dungeon build here, I feel like everything we have taken here is perfect, but I really like Pain and Gain as well, because it heals you for 2% of your maximum health every time you take damage, but it only works every 10 seconds. So imagine every 10 seconds, whenever you take damage, you will get healed by 2% of your maximum health. The problem with taking this one here is that I would have to remove something from the talent tree over here. The thing I maybe could consider removing would be Rumbling Earth, because Rumbling Earth, well, our Shockwave is no matter what always gonna like stun everyone here in front of me. I can't remember how. I don't think it has like a maximum, but everyone in front of me is gonna get stunned. What Rumbling Earth does is Shockwave range is increased by 6, and when it strikes at least 3 targets, it reduces the cooldown by 15 seconds. So technically, if you stun more than 3 targets, it's reset, like it actually reduces half the cooldown, which is quite nice. But it's a spell that is only really needed in case you are stunning, you actually are stunning and interrupting in dungeons, or if you're just running around and leveling. Technically, if I was running and leveling, I would just remove Rumbling Earth and take Pain and Gain, because it's just going to heal you passively all the time. So again, if you're doing solo content, delves, leveling, go with Pain and Gain. If you're doing dungeons and you actually want to like be helpful with stunning mobs and do high keys and stunning and interrupting, then you should definitely go with Rumbling Earth. But if you're doing low content, just having fun, leveling, Pain and Gain is the way. But yeah, just letting you know. Then we also have Thunderclap. It's just a spell we are picking. It's inside the single button assistant as well, and it's just a spell that is inside the rotation. So don't think too much about it. We just choose a Thunderclap as well. It's a great spell for like AoE damaging, but again, it's like it's a spell that we just, let me see here, Thunderclap. There we go. Actually, I just reminded me why we have Thunderclap. It's actually embarrassing, I forgot that. Because I was like, there was a secret behind why we are using Thunderclap. So the reason we have Thunderclap is because it technically applies Rend to all targets. Normally, when you're using Rend, which is of our, Rend is our like bleeding damage spell, which of course is a very nice spell. Like, it deals a lot of bleeding damage on your target. But the cool thing with Thunderclap is that it actually applies Rend to all the targets. Very nice. So now with Rend, we can apply it with all the targets when there's like a dungeon. And when there's a lot of mobs around us, and the single button rotation is automatically doing that, so you don't have to worry about it. And in the raid build, we're using it as well, but I mean, the main reason we're using it in the raid build is actually to get down and get these two stats here. It's not very often we're going to be using Thunderclap in a raid, but still, we're using it in the raid build just to get the additional strength down here, and also some more stamina and so on. But yeah, that was why we used it. Kind of forgotten that. Then we also have Rallying Cry. It's a nice little cooldown you can use. The problem is we cannot remove it because then we cannot go this way down here. Usually, I mean, I wouldn't even mind like removing it and take pain again. But again, the problem is that we can't get the talents down here, so we just have to take it. But it's just a cooldown. You yell and gives everyone 10% more HP in your raid or dungeon, which is, I mean, nice, but yeah, that's it. Then we have Shockwave. We already kind of talked about it, but like imagine these 3 mobs are casting a spell and you kind of want to help your team interrupting them, then you can use Shockwave and boom, now they all stunned. Very, very nice. Then we have Crushing Force. Mortal Strike deals an additionally 10% damage and deals 10% increased critical strike damage. And that's what I talked about in the stats section of this video. That basically that's increasing all the crit damage, which is why crit is a nice stat for Arms Warriors as well. Maximum Rage increased by 30. This helps us to like overcap in Rage. Then we had the Rumbling Earth we already talked about, but basically if Shockwave hits 3 targets, it will reset the it will reduce the cooldown by half, and also it will increase the range by 6. Nice. Then we have Reinforced Plates. Stamina is increased by 10% and armor is increased by 10% as well, which is nice. It makes us a bit more tanky. Then we also have Barbaric Training. Slam, Cleave and Whirlwind deal 10% increased damage and 10% increased critical strike damage. Another critical strike damage. Very nice. Then we have Double Time. Charge gains 1 additional charge and its cooldown is reduced by 3%. And again, 3 seconds. The main reason we actually are using Charge is to get some rage. As you can see, each time we use it, it actually gives us 20 rage. But also it's a nice way of like, you know, going from like a pack of mobs here to another pack of mobs over there. And also we of course have Heroic Leap to also help with that. But it just gives us like 3 abilities where we can actually like, you know, get away faster, which is quite nice. And then we have Seismic Reverberation. This one here is one we only use in the dungeon build because if Whirlwind or Cleave hits 3 or more enemies, it hits them 1 additional time for 30% of the damage. So really nice and powerful for like multiple mobs whenever there's 3 targets or more. But in raids it's not used, so which is why we don't use this one here in raids. Then we also have while wielding a 2-handed weapon, your damage is increased by 6 and damage taken from area effects attacks is reduced by 4%. As you can imagine, we're using this one here both in the raid and the dungeon build because that is just overpowered to just get like 6% more damage. We also have Crawl Strikes. This one here is only one we're using in the raid build. I would love to have it in the dungeon build, but the problem is I don't have anything I can trade to get this one here. The reason for why we can have it in the raid build is because we can say goodbye to Uproar and also Thunderous Words. Because we have this one here called Thunderous Roar, which is really great for like LE damage. Also, it's very great for like single target damage, but it's really great for like LE damage. Where this one here reduces the cooldown of it by 45 seconds, which is great in a dungeon, so you can use it more often. So it only has 45-second cooldown. It just allows you to like use it on basically every pull in the dungeon, which is nice. And also increase the duration of Thunderous Roar bleed effect by 2%, and Thunderous Roar bleed effect cause enemies to take 20% increased damage from all your blades, which is nice as well. So it just makes the entire cooldown like so much like better. But again, in a raid, this one is not that powerful. So instead we are actually removing these 2 and taking Cruel Strike, which is increasing your critical strike by 2% and critical strike damage of execute is increased by 10%, which is quite nice. So And again, execute is such an important spell when we get to like raid bosses and so on. So that's why we are sacrificing these two down here to take Cruel Strike in the raid build, but in the dungeon build we are not using it because these two are more valuable. Then we also have Wild Strikes, haste increased by 2%, and your auto attack critical strikes increase your attack speed by 20%. So as you can see here, another reason for why we really like critical strike in this build here, because when we actually crit with auto attack, we also now get auto attack speed increased by 20%, which is quite nice. We also have gain strength for equal to 10% of your armor. So basically the more armor we have, the more strength we have, which is quite nice. Which is also helping us for the reason why I keep talking about upgrade level, having the highest upgrade level. Because having the highest upgrade level on your armor is also giving you more armor is also giving you more armor, fun enough. So now the more armor we have, the more strength we have, the higher upgrade level we have. The more armor we have, the higher upgrade level we have, the more strength it also has. So it just goes hand in hand. Then we have Thunderous Roar, we just talked about it. Basically, you are making a big roar, dealing 300k physical damage to all enemies within 12 yards, and causing them to bleed for 800k physical damage over 16 seconds. And it deals reduced damage after 5 targets. So very nice. And we just talked about these two down here, these two bonuses, which we only have in the dungeon build and not the raid build, because in the raid build we are taking this one here, the Cruel Strike, Pain and Gain. We're removing also Shockwave, also Rumbling Earth, also Seismic Reparation, because we're not going to attack 3 targets anyway. And then we take from these 3 points here and these 2 down here, we're taking 2 times in Cruel Strike, we're taking Spell Reflect, Pain and Gain, and also this one here that increase our movement speed by 5%, which is also nice to have in a raid. Yeah. Then we also have Avatar, and that one is actually the same for when it comes to the dungeon build and the raid build. We always pick Avatar, transform you into a Colossus for 20 seconds, causing you to deal 20% increased damage and removing all roots and snares. Very nice. Just a very cool cooldown that you manually have to use down here. And then we of course also have Warlord's Torment. Activating Avatar granting 6 seconds of Recklessness. The additional rage duration of this Recklessness is reduced by 25%. So basically what happens is when you actually click on Avatar, you will also use the spell called Recklessness, which increases your crit chance. I'm pretty sure like it's by 100%, isn't it? Here, rage generation increased by 25%. Critical strike chance of all abilities is by 20%. Okay, so yeah, basically what it does is we get 25% more rage and 20% more crit, but only for the 6 seconds, the first 6 seconds of actually Avatar. It's just kind of like making Avatar even better for the first 6 seconds. So, I mean, it's not bad, but it's a very nice one, especially in the opener, to get more rage, to get more crits, and especially since we're using strong spells in the start of a burst. So that's the talents we're using in the left side here. Let's now move on to the hero tree in the middle. So let's get through the hero tree in the middle. Again, in the dungeon build and the build we're using for basically every continent in the game, we're using the Colossus tree here. But for the raid build where it's more about single target damage, we're using the Slayer build here. I will explain through each of them why we're using them. We'll basically go through them and you'll very fast see why we're using them. The Colossus tree here is first getting you a spell called Demolish. It unleashes a series of precise and powerful strikes against your target, dealing 1.9 million damage and 1.1 million damage to enemies within 8 yards. Deals reduced damage beyond 8 targets. While channeling, you take 10% less damage and are immune to stun, knockbacks, and forced movement speeds. You can block, parry, dodge, and use certain defensive abilities while channeling Demolish. So you can see already now, every 45 seconds, we can deal almost 2 million damage to the current target we have and 1 million damage to everyone around it, for basically at least the 8 first targets. After that, it gets reduced damage. But this you can imagine the tank pulls 6 mobs, you use Demolish, and boom, it just deals insane amount of damage, which is quite nice. Beside of that, we also have Colossal Might. Colossal Might increase the damage dealt by your next Demolish by 10%, Demolish over up here, stacking up to 10 times. So now basically we can get a stack up to 10 times, so we can actually increase the damage of Demolish by 100%. So how do we actually get this Colossal Might? Mortal Strike grants a stack of Colossal Might, and Cleave grant a stack of Colossal Might when it strikes 3 or more targets. So basically, every time you use Mortal Strike, every time you use Cleave and it hits 3 targets at least, you get a stack of Colossal Might. So you can see very easily you can actually build up those 10 stacks before next time you can use the Demolish. So it will basically deal 100% more damage. So instead of dealing 2 million damage, it's going to deal 4 million damage. And instead of it's going to deal 1 million AoE damage, it's going to deal 2 million AoE damage, which is quite nice. Also, Colossal Might increases damage of your Overpower by 5% per stack, which is quite nice. Now it just also increased the passively Overpower of each of the stacks. So basically it can go up to 50% increased damage on Overpower, which is nice. Also, Mortal Strike, Critical Strike grant additionally stack of Colossal Might. So now whenever Mortal Strike actually does a Critical Strike, it will give you like more stacks of Colossal Might. Well, at least one more, so that would be 2 stacks. But this is another cool thing why we really like Critical Strike on the Warrior. Arms Warrior. Then we also have Dominance of the Colossus. Colossal Might now stacks up to 10 times. Yeah, I think without this one here, it might only stacked up to like 5 times, since this one here just says like 10 times. But now with this one here, it can stack up to 10 times. If you gain a stack of Colossal Might and are at max stacks, the cooldown of Demolish is reduced by 2 seconds. So imagine you already have the 10 stacks from Colossal Might. But now, whenever you get additional stacks from Mortal Strike or Cleave, it will just reduce the cooldown of Demolish by 2 seconds every time. So now we can potentially get Demolish even faster than those 45 seconds, which is nice. Enemies affected by Demolish, so basically the targets that get hit by Demolish, take up to 10% more damage from you and deal up to 10% less damage to you for 10 seconds based on the number of stacks of Colossal Might consumed by Demolish. So it sounds like the more stacks we have when we actually use Demolish, the less damage the targets are going to deal to you, and then the more damage you're going to deal to the target, but up to 10%. So I think like for each of the stacks, it's going to be like 1% for how it works. Then we also have Martial Expert. Critical strike damage of your abilities is increased by 10%, and the amount of damage blocked by your critical blocks is increased by 20%. We also have Arterial Blade. Colossal Might increase the damage of your rend and Deep Wound by 5% per stack. So now, even with the Colossal Might we keep getting from Cleave or Mortal Strike, it also increases the damage we do by rend and Deep Wound. So basically our AoE abilities, sorry, not our 2 bleeding abilities are also increased in damage from Colossal Might, which is very nice. Mortal Strike and Cleave damage is increased by 20, so again another one why this build here is just like so plain when it comes to AoE, because it just really boosts the damage you get from Cleave. Then we also have Shockwave, also knocks enemies into the air, and its cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds. And also we already talked about this one here, but this one here, when your health is brought below 35% of your health, below 35%, you gain a second wind, healing you for 12% of your maximum health for over 2 seconds. So basically 12% health in just 2 seconds, like boom. But this can only happen every 60 seconds. Then we also have you deal 5% more damage and take 5% less damage, just like always, which is nice. And also increasing your size by 5%, so you're actually going to be taller than other characters in the game, which is quite nice, especially if you play like a Tauren. Then, of course, if we go to raid build, we're using Slayer here. So now you saw before why the other one is such a nice like AoE, like all ability, increasing the damage of Mortal Strike, increasing the damage of Cleave, increasing the damage of Overpower, increasing the damage of our bleeds. It's just like nice for all situations. But then we have the Slayer, which is very more focused on dealing damage with Blade Storm and Execute. So, and also we have Slayer Dominance here. Your attacks against your primary target have a high chance to overwhelm them and overwhelm their defense and trigger a Slayer Strike, dealing 375k damage, physical damage, and apply Mark of Execution. Increase the damage they take from your next execute by 15% and stacks 3 times. So basically, every time you do damage, like damage against the target you are targeting, you have a chance to keep, like, you know, like imagine you're just using abilities and suddenly it triggers this Slayer Strike and just randomly deal 375 damage, K damage. So here you can see the main reason for why Slayer is such a good raid build, because it just keeps using extra attacks against the current target you have, plus it increases the damage of your next execute and can stack up to 3 times. And again, execute is a great spell again against bosses, because you know it's like a single target spell. Of course, if you're using Sweeping Strike, it's gonna like deal more damage to everyone, but still you can see why this is just so sublime when it comes to single target raid bosses. Then we also have Overwhelming Blades. Each strike of Blade Storm applies Overwhelmed to all enemies affected. Increase the damage you deal to them by 1% for 20 seconds, and it can stack up to maximum 10 times. So yeah, basically everyone who's gonna get attacked by the Blade Storm is getting increased the damage they deal, increase the damage you deal to them by 1% up to 10 stacks, which is quite nice. Then we also have your next Mortal Strike after Blade Storm ends, deals 50% additional damage. And then we also have Mortal Strike and Cleave. When Cleave hits 3 or more targets, have a 20% chance to cause you unleash a flurry of steel, striking all nearby enemies by 400% physical damage and applying Overwhelm. Deals reduced damage beyond 8 targets. Of course, this one here would be both nice for like raid builds and dungeon build, but still, again, it's another attack that can randomly come out and deal damage to your target. So another, like you can say, Slayer Dominance attack. Then we also have when you execute a target that you have marked for execution. Again, remember the passive one at the top here. Whenever this happens, it marks them for execution, dealing more damage with execute. So when you execute a target that you have marked for execution, you both reduce the cooldown of Blade Storm for 5 seconds and apply 2 stacks of Overwhelmed to the target per stack of marked execution consumed. You can also now use Pummel and Stormbolt while Blade Storming. So let me explain. We had this Overwhelmed up here. Now, basically what will happen is it's also going to give them the stacks of Overwhelm where we're going to deal more damage to them when we actually use Execute on a target that is marked for Execute. So imagine we have just had 3 attacks from Slayer Dominance. 3 times it has attacked, which means it's going to increase the damage of our next Execute by 15, 30, and 45. That's 3 stacks. Now we actually use Execute on a target that is marked with those 3 stacks. Now it's also going to give them 6 stacks of, because it's going to give them 2 stacks. Well, it's going to give them 2 stacks per stack. And because there was 3 stacks of execution mark, it will now give them 6 stacks of Overwhelming Blades. So basically this just means that Overwhelming Blades can now both come from Blade Storm, but also from your Execute when it's used against a target that is marked for Execute. I hope it makes sense. Then we also have every free Slayer Strike. You know, this Slayer Strike you have up here, the passive one. You gain every free Slayer Strike you gain. Every free Slayer Strike you gain Sudden Death. So Sudden Death is the spell that makes you like be able to use your attacks have a chance to make your next execute cost no rage, be usable on any target regardless of their health, and deal damage as if you spend 40 rage. So now every time you get 3 of these Slayer Dominance, where you actually do a Slayer Strike, it will now also give you Sudden Death, so you can actually use execute straight away, no matter how much HP they have. Let me just write here. And also using Sudden Death accelerate your next Blade Storm, striking 1% at one additional time, max 3. Blade Storm total duration is unchanged. So let me try explain this without confusing you. Now, imagine your Slayer Strike, which is the one up here, that just randomly comes all the time, has now dealt 3, like it now has attacked 3 times your target passively. Now you get a sudden death. You're using sudden death, and then it's going to increase how many times Blade Storm is actually dealing damage to your target. Like it's going to increase how many times Blade Storm is going to tick. So imagine Blade Storm might, attack for like, I don't know if it actually says it. It doesn't. So it might be attacking them like 8 times to deal that 1.6 million damage. Now it's going to attack 7 times and of course increase the damage it deals. So, but again, as I said, using sudden death accelerates your next Blade Storm striking 1 additional time. So yeah, which is quite nice. Though, one thing I have to get confirmed. So I was just double checking, but it's true what I was believing. So you don't need to get the sudden death from this method before it actually starts giving your Blade Storm more attacks. It can also just be from the normal sudden death, which your attacks have a chance to make your next execute cost no rage. So it doesn't matter if sudden death comes from this one over here or it comes from 3 times Slayer Strike. They all are going to give you this buff here. So now you can see here that my next Blade Storm is going to attack 3 additionally times. So when I use Blade Storm here, it will actually deal 3 times more. Like it's still attacking the same amount of times. Not amount of times. It's still attacking over the same amount of duration, but now instead of only maybe attacking 8 times, it's now going to attack like 9, 10, 11 times. So it is basically just going to deal more damage. And again, this is not something you need to think about. It's just something passively that's going to happen. Yeah. Then you also have your heal for 50% of your damage dealt by sudden death, which can be quite nice. So whenever you actually use sudden death and it's going to, use your execute, that 50% of that damage is going to heal back to you. And also mark for execution, increase the critical strike chance and critical strike damage of your next execute on the target. Again, another reason for why execute is just nice. So yeah, that was the hero tree in the middle for both the dungeon build and the raid build. Actually, wait, no, hold on. No, I'm wrong. We actually forgot the right side. I'm sorry. I've been away for 4 days, so I just need to get back in the loop. Then we also have Relentless Pursuit. Charge increase your movement speed by 70% for 3 seconds. Also, charge now removes all the movement impairing effects on you. This effect can only happen every 30 seconds. So basically now, the first charge you use every 30 seconds is also going to like remove all the snares and stuff from you, which of course is very nice. Then when Overpower has its cooldown reset by Tactician, the Tactician is this one over here, you have 1.5% chance per rage spent on attacks to reset the remaining cooldown of Overpower. But when Overpower has its cooldown reset by Tactician, which is this one over here, your next Overpower deals 25% additional damage and 25% additionally critical damage. Very nice. Also, Overpower damage is increased by 30. So again, you can see this tree here is just like it's such a good tree for like dealing more damage to my current target, where Colossus shines a lot with like dealing damage to everyone as well. So yeah, again, that was the dungeon and the raid tree we're using here in the middle. And then we have the talents in the right side, the arms talents, which of course is the ones that is most important and the ones that deals the most, is the most depending on how much damage we do. As you can see, the dungeon build here is using these talents here, as you can see at the moment, where for example we have Cleave, which replaces Whirlwind, and so on. And we're also using, for example, Ravager, where the raid build here is not using Cleave because there's no point having Cleave, and it's using Blade Storm instead because the Slayer tree uses way more like the Blade Storm in that build. So that's why for the raid build we're for example using Blade Storm, we're not using Cleave, and in the dungeon build we use Cleave and we're using Ravager and so on. You can see here like the things that changes, like it takes like everything over here in the raid build, which again is increasing like execute, and in the dungeon build we have like more stuff down here like deal damage to everyone and so on. For example, in the dungeon build we also don't use a sudden death because we don't really benefit that much from like getting more executes. That's more again over in this Slayer tree we're using that. But let's go through it slowly and see everything we can get. First of all, we have Mortal Strike. This is a spell that is like your main damage ability. I think I forgot to say that in the stats section, but as haste is actually also reducing the cooldown on spells that has a green color, or the cooldown number. So that is also another reason for why haste is such a great thing. It reduces the cooldown of Cleave, Thunderclap, and even Mortal Strike. As you can see, they have a green cooldown. So basically, Mortal Strike and Vicious Strike deals 860k damage, physical damage, and reduces the effectiveness of healing on the target by 50%. So I mean, it's literally every 5 seconds you can like use a million strike damage attack, which is insane. Then we have Overpower. Overpower the enemy, dealing 430k physical damage, cannot be blocked, dodged, or parried. Increase the damage of your next Mortal Strike or Cleave by 50%, stacking up to 2 times. So it actually deals great damage, but also increases damage of our next Mortal Strike or Cleave. And again, we have the Tactician here to reset the cooldown of Overpower. So every time you're actually using Rage, that's a 2%, like for every Rage, you have 2% chance per rage, so every single rage, like when you use a spell that uses like 30 rage, all those 30 rage has each a 2% chance to reset the cooldown of Overpower, just to let you know how it works. Then we also have Martial Prowess. Overpower, increase the damage of your next Mortal Strike or Cleave by 50%, stack up to 2 times. So that bonus effect we have seen up here is actually coming from this one here. We also have Die by Sword, increase your parry chance by 100% and reduce all damage you take by 30%. A great ability you can use in case you're about to die. And then we also have Execute no longer has a cooldown, and if your foe survives, 10% of the rage spent is refunded, which is okay. I mean, the single button assistant is still going to be using Execute automatically when you have a target that gets below whatever that amount is, like that is 20% health. But yeah. Then we also have improved Overpower. Overpower has 2 charges and deals 50% more damage. Then we also have Fueled by Violence. I really like this one here. You are healed for 85% of the damage dealt by deep wounds. So you know, again, we have our mastery here, which is giving a bleeding on the target whenever we use Mortal Strike, Warbreaker, Cleave, and so on. So when you actually are using, for example, Cleave here, all of these targets here are going to get the deep wound ability, the deep wound bleeding. So if, for example, we jump down here and losing a lot of HP, you can see here that all the bleedings you now have from deep wound is just like healing you all the time, which is quite nice. So it's just like a free healing. It's just free healing, which is really nice. But yeah, very, very, very nice. Yep. I don't know if I remember right. Yeah, and in the raid build, we of course using sudden death, because when we actually went through this, we of course have the imminent demise here, where every time we are using sudden death, we get one more additional strike, or like an additional attack on our next blade storm, which is, and again, sudden death is a great talent for like a single target damage. It's very nice to be able to keep casting executes on the boss we are fighting. So yeah, but not used in the dungeon build though, but is actually used in the raid build. Though in the raid build we are not using this one here, Feather of the Battle. If Cleave or Whirlwind hits 2 or more target, you also slam your primary target. So it basically, if for example I cast Cleave here or Whirlwind, it also slams the target in front of me, which is the spell here, Slam, which is also inside your single button rotation. But it's just like a little nice thing that it also uses slams on the target there, which is nice since it is a dungeon leveling build where we're going to be fighting multiple mobs at the same time. But again, this one is for the raid build, this one is for the dungeon build. Yeah, and that's why you can see here in support we have one of these two, so we can actually get to the next point down here called Impale. Then we also have Tactician, we already talked about that one. Then we have Colossal Smash, very important spell. Smash the enemy's armor, dealing 340k physical damage, and increase the damage you deal to them by 30% for 10 seconds. In the raid build, we are using that spell as it is, because of this passive down here. In the dungeon build, we have replaced it by Warbreaker. So what it does is basically we are smashing the ground now, and now it still deals 340k damage to everyone around, but now to everyone around you within 10 yards, and increases damage you deal to them by 30%. So the difference is this one here is just making the Colossal Smash damage increase by 30. So actually the boss you're using Colossal Smash against is taking 30% more damage, but also the increased damage we deal to them, the 30% increased damage for 10 seconds is now increased by 3 seconds. But Warbreaker is Omega for dungeons and leveling and delves, because we are now dealing 30% more damage to everyone around us. Like, you know, it helps with the AoE damage. Where in raid builds, of course, we're using this one here, where we just increases Colossal Smash against the target we are attacking. So, just to let you know. And then we have Impale. Critical strike damage of your abilities is increased by 10. So now every time we do crit damage, it actually is increased by 10% damage. Again, another reason for why we love critical strike as an Arms warrior. Then we have Rend. Rend is an ability that deals bleeding damage, which is also increased by Colossus here, which is very nice. And you don't have to think about using Rend yourself. It's all inside the single button assistant. And when there is more than, you know, a couple of mobs at the same time, it's going to use the single button assistant. It's going to use Thunderclap to apply Rend to all the targets for you. Again, that was why we actually have Thunderclap. I was for 2 seconds like, why do we have Thunderclap? But actually it's so we can actually apply, you know, like Rend to all targets very, very easily. But it's a nice damage over time ability, and also yeah, it just deals a lot of damage over time, of course, which is nice. Then we also have Anger Management. Every 20 rage you spend on attacks reduce the remaining cooldown on Warbreaker, Bladestorm, and Ravager. So now, the Warbreaker we have here, Colossal Smash technically, and Ravager and Bladestorm is now keep reducing cooldown by 1 second every time we use 20 rage. So don't worry, we're going to actually be using the abilities faster than what the cooldown is actually telling us. Then we also have Mortal Strike and Cleave have a 20% chance to instantly reset their own cooldown, which is of course very nice. You could technically have a chance to do double Mortal Strike. Also, when Sweeping Strike ends, your next Cleave and Whirlwind deals 25% increased damage for each ability used during Sweeping Strikes that damage the second target. And also we have Cleave, which is replacing Whirlwind, but now it strikes all enemies in front of you for 300k physical damage and inflicts deep wounds. Cleave will consume your Overpower effects to deal increased damage, deals reduced damage beyond 5 targets. So now it actually, those powers, the powers that Overpower could be using, is actually used by Cleave as well. But the main reason for why we have Cleave is because it also does Deep Wound, which is quite nice, you know, like an AoE damage. Because you can see here, never mind, we don't have to see that. Then we have also Bloodborne. Your bleed effects deal 10% increased damage, so just like more bleed damage. Again, if we go into the raid build here, you will see that both Cleave and both this one here, where Sweeping Strike is getting damaged. Like Sweeping Strike is like it's a buff you put on where for 15 seconds your single target damaging ability hit one additional target within 8 yards for 75% of the damage. So it's like an AoE buff. So we're not buffing it from this one here, and we're not taking Cleave because we don't need that one in the done raid build. Instead, we're like going, you can see down here, taking these things and sudden death. So then we also, well, we had the one with increasing bleed damage. We also have Overpower deals 50% additional damage and has 10% increased critical strike chance to, let's take that again. Overpower deals 15% additional damage, yes. Has 10% increased critical strike chance, yes. And deals 10% increased critical strike damage. Nice. Then we also have Warbreaker increase your haste by 10% or by 20% if any target is below 35% health. Last for the duration of Warbreaker. Quite nice. Then we of course have the Wall Breaker, we already talked about that one. And if you are in the raid build here, you will notice that we have taken this one instead, Blunt Instrument, and we have taken Massacre, which execute is usable on targets below 35% health. So instead of only by actually 20% health, it can now be used on 35% health, which makes sense in a raid because raid bosses, you know, a raid boss going from 35 to 20 takes actually like a decent amount of time. But now the warrior gets is allowed to start the execution phase way earlier compared to normal. So again, very nice for like raid bosses, but not so usable in dungeons or just like overall content. Okay. Then we also have the Deft Experience. Mastery increased by 2%, and Tactician's chance to trigger is increased by additionally 1%. So you can see the one up here, Tactician, it will actually increase the damage, how often it will trigger by 1% up here to get even more overpowers. In the raid build, we only use one of them, which is why the raid build only has 1.5% for getting more overpower, and the dungeon build has 2%. Also in the raid build, the dungeon build, we're using this one here, Battle Lord. Overpower has 35% chance to reset the cooldown of Mortal Strike and generate 10 rage. But we don't use that one in the raid build because in the raid build we want to have all this stuff over here, so we cannot have this one here as well. Then we also have Valor in Victory, increase versatility by 2% and reduce the cooldown of die by the sword for 30 seconds, which, I mean, this is quite nice. But again, also getting that 2% versatility is not bad because that's 2% more damage and 1% less damage taken. In the raid build though, we are using this one over here called Critical Thinking. Critical strike chance is increased by 1 and execute immediately refunds 10% of the rage spent. As you can see, it actually reminds very much about this one here. Also gives like, you know, more crit and increases execute. The same with over here, also gives more crit and gives something to execute. But again, we're using Massacre and execute Critical Thinking here in the raid build, but in the dungeon build, we're not using those two. Then we had Battle Lord, we already talked about that one. We have also Deep Wound, Rend, and Thunderous Roar. Bleed effects last 6 seconds longer and have 5% increased critical strike chance, which is nice, makes the entire rotation, you know, just like more smooth, but also gives an increased like critical strike chance. If you have Rend, Mortal Strike inflicts Rend on targets below 35% health. I mean, that one is not that important. It's more like the top thing. But like if you have Rend, Mortal Strike inflicts Rend on targets below 35% health. Of course, that can help against like mobs, bosses, whatever. Whenever like we use Mortal Strike, it will also do automatically Rend when they have less than 35% health. It's not really the important one. The important one is the one above, where all our dots are staying longer, so we don't have to like reuse them more often. But also, of course, the dot that we're getting from Thunderous Roar, which is overpowered, is now of course also going to be there longer time, which is nice. Then we have Ravager is used in the dungeon build because you basically throw down a weapon on the ground that spins and deals a lot of damage to everyone. So it's nice because you can then also do cleave at the same time, just so much more damage for the single target, for the multiple targets you have around you. Just very nice. But in the raid build, we are using Bladestorm because the Slayer tree is just increasing Bladestorm a lot. It gives us the overwhelming attack, and also we increased it like how many times Bladestorm is dealing damage from sudden deaths. So yeah, Ravager, dungeon build, Bladestorm, raid build. Also, your Mortal Strike, cleave, and execute critical strike damage is increased by 10%. So again, more critical damage, very nice. And your execute has a 5% increased critical strike chance. And if we go over to the raid build here, you will see here we also are using Juggernaut. Execute increases execute's damage dealt by 3% for 12 seconds, stacking up to 15% 15 times. And again, it makes sense because the Slayer single target raid build is just really happy for execute. Yeah. Then we also have here Unhinged. Every overtime Bladestorm or Ravager deal damage, you automatically cast a Mortal Strike at your target or random nervy enemy. And that's true. So every time like Ravager or Bladestorm deals second damage, like, you know, damage, then it uses it deals damage, then it deals damage again, then it casts a Mortal Strike at the same time, deals damage again, Mortal Strike, deals damage again, Mortal Strike, and so on. It's quite nice. At your target or a random enemy. So like, it could be anyone around you. Whirlwind and Cleave deal 50% more increased damage during Ravager for 9 seconds after Bladestorm ends. So Whirlwind, Cleave, 50% more damage during Ravage or 9 seconds after Bladestorm ends. So yeah, and it makes sense because while you have Ravage active, you can use Cleave and Whirlwind. If you have Bladestorm, you can't use them while it's active because Bladestorm is not making you allowed to use any of the other damage spells. So it makes sense that it's 9 seconds after, which is another one we're not using in the dungeon raid build, which you can probably imagine why, because it's all about like AoE damage. But again, this is one we only use for the dungeon build, where in the raid build, we are picking Instant Executioner's Precision. Execute causes your target to take 35% more damage from your next Mortal Strike, stacking up to 2 times. So technically, you could make it stack up to 70%, and then your Mortal Strike is going to deal 70% more damage, which is quite insane when you think about that Mortal Strike already now deals almost 1 million damage. But again, that's the raid build, that's the dungeon build. Now, let's go to the gameplay part. Oh, sorry, the rotation part. So, when it comes to rotation, what you should always do whenever you enter a dungeon or raid, the first thing, of course, whenever like everyone has joined and your full party raid, the first thing you should do is always use Battle Shout. Battle Shout increases the attack power of all your party or raid members by 5%. So you can see here. Attack power increased by 5%. Everyone is going to be happy to have it, of course, at least not the healers and casters, but you know what I mean. This is a spell that you should be using always in the start, and I mean, I just feel it fun to just like keep reapplying all the time, just because you could just keep pressing it, which is quite fun. Then we have the normal rotation, outside, of course, using Battle Shout in the start of a dungeon or raid. The normal rotation is quite easy compared to other single button assistant builds. So first thing you would do is you would use Charge to get that 20% additional rage. Then you're going to use Avatar right after, and then you're going to be spamming 1. Because Avatar is going to increase the damage by 20%. It's also going to call your, it's going to use Recklessness for 6 seconds. And Recklessness is going to increase your crit by 20 and your rage, to how much rage you get for 25% for only 6 seconds. So that's why it's very important to charge and then use Avatar and 1 kind of like together. Like what it would look like would be something like this here. So you can see charge, Avatar, and quickly 1. And now we're just going to go through our rotation. So you can see here, it charged. It used Avatar, so we deal more damage. It used Thunderclap. It used Sweeping Strike, and it kind of like just go through my damage abilities. And that's honestly of whatever you have to like look for. That's the entire rotation. There's actually not much more to it. But technically what happens is that it will first, as we saw, we use Charge. If there's more than one target, like multiple targets, it's going to use Sweeping Strike, where it's going to deal more damage to, like it's going to use all the damage abilities you're using. It's also going to copy to another close target. Then it's going to use Thunderclap to put rend on all of them. It's going to use Demolish as well together with the rotation, but it's going to use Ravager first, which is the spell like that deals damage on the ground, like a Bladestorm. Then it's going to use the Thundering Roar to like deal damage to all the targets, Warbreaker to deal more damage to them, and then it's going to end up using Demolish, and then basically just go between all your spells like Cleave, Execute, Mortal Strikes, Overpower, you know, just keep like going between them. I'm just mentioning this because I have a few people who's always be like, hey, could you try explain what rotation it actually is using? But again, Charge, Avatar, and then you basically just press 1 and just like let it do its rotation. As you can see, Thunderstrike, Thunderclap, Sweeping Strike, Thunderous Roar, Warbreaker, and then it starts using Demolish and just to go through your rotation. So yeah, but that's the thing you would do with the dungeon build. The raid build, so the only difference between the raid build and the dungeon build, the only active ability we have that is different, is that we don't have shockwave and we're getting spell reflection. Again, like, it's up to you if you actually want to like use spell reflection, but spell reflection is like great to have in a raid because you know a lot of random spells get cast all the time, and we don't need shockwave in a raid because we're not gonna like stun multiple mobs at the same time. But again, in the raid build we're using spell reflect, and in the raid build we don't use shockwave, but in the dungeon build we use shockwave and we're not using spell reflection. If you really want to use spell reflection, you can for example remove second wind and take spell reflection, but I just prefer having second wind or spell reflection. But rotation wise, on a single target like over there, it will be exactly the same as here. You would, you know, of course always keep battle shout up, make sure you have it on you. You would use charge, avatar, and spam 1. That's it. Again, that's basically it. And whenever avatar is ready, you're gonna spam it again, and such on. So a few tips and tricks about all the other spells we have. We have Pummel. So basically Pummel, if this target here was like casting a spell, I could use Pummel and interrupt whatever it's casting. And now it wouldn't be able to cast that spell for 3 seconds. We also of course have Charge, which is giving more rage. It's a nice spell to use, and if there's like multiple targets around, you could use like multiple times to get like a bit more rage. And then we have Heroic Leap, which is another great spell to like get away from, like, imagine that Dementius or some kind of boss is smashing the ground here, then you could like, you know, using Heroic Leap and jump over here very fast. We also have Impending Victory, using 10 rage, but healing you for 30% of your maximum health, which is insane. And the cooldown resets whenever you kill a target that is like the same level as you know, where the level is not gray. Then we also have Heroic Throw. Heroic Throw is actually inside the single button rotation, and it would automatically like try to use, you can see it automatically uses it when we are like far away. But I still just like have to have it, because then I can like very fast click on another target, and you know, it's just like nice to have. Battle Shout, keep it up all the time. It's on for 60 minutes, give everyone 5% of attack power. Then we have Berserker Rage, very nice like utility spell. When you use it, it's going to remove all like fear, sap, and some other incapacitate abilities. You can even use it just inside, like when you actually get feared, then you can use it inside the fear to get out of the fear. Then we also have Die by Sword, reduce all damage you take by 30%. And also parry, your parry chances increase all the way up to 100, which is quite nice. Of course I can see parry here. Then we also have Rallying Cry, gives everyone in your party and you 10% more HP. It's like if you know that the boss is about to do some spell that can deal a lot of damage, it's like it's nice to, yeah, just throw it. And then we have Shockwave. Shockwave is like, so just like we have our Pummel spell that is interrupting the target you're targeting, then what Shockwave does, it basically interrupts all 3 targets, well, everyone in front of you, like all the targets in front of you, it's interrupt those. So it's kind of like you have your single target interrupt spell, and you have your multiple target interrupt spell. We also have Stormbolt, which is also interrupting. So you actually technically have 3 interrupt spells. You have Pummel, Shockwave, and also Stormbolt. And then you also have Hamstring to make the target run slower. Like, imagine a mob is chasing the healer, then you can make the mob very slow, and now the healer has a chance to run away. Yeah, and the only difference in the raid build active spells is that we don't have Shockwave, and then I have just put it down Spell Reflection where Shockwave is right now. That's the only difference really. So yeah, that's the rotation. Let's go to the gameplay part. So here we go. Usually, as everything I always do, is a battle shout to give everyone 5% more attack speed. Well, not attack speed, attack power. And now we're just gonna use avatar and spam 1. I mean, it's quite straightforward. I have just the eye level to be able to do heroic dungeons, so not the greatest gear. But as you can see, the damage meter right now I'm actually doing quite fantastic. It could be that I'm the only one who is actually doing real damage to this first pack of mobs here, but let's see if it actually continues. Of course, I also use cooldowns. So I might be like far behind in the next one. My keyboard is also acting very strange. It's kind of like whenever I click a spell, it has like a 1 second delay. I don't know why it does that right now, but let's just see if we can do damage without it. We of course are fighting against a Fury Warrior, which has more HP than me. So he probably has more like better stats than me. Also, Fury Warrior is higher. It's a higher meta spec, if you know what I mean. Like it's a higher tier spec. So let's see if we can actually out DPS him. Right now it's actually going fantastic, but I was also able to use my Demolish as ability against all these targets, which of course give me a big advantage. Now let's see on a boss fight how good we can do. I didn't have my best cooldown ready, my avatar, but it's getting ready now. So let's see, we're gonna interrupt, not stand in AoE. This is one of the cool things with using single button assistant. We could just like move. That Fury Warrior though, he's not moving very much. Now we're doing a lot of bleed damage to all the targets. And we managed to like surpass the Fury Warrior. The Arcane Mage though is doing crazy single target damage, but I'm not surprised. I mean, he's doing a lot of... Oh, he's actually doing a lot of damage with Arcane Barrage. But still, we managed to really beat that Fury Warrior. Oh. I have forgotten another boss was coming out. So now you can see here again. Dealing great damage. Oh, the Fury Warrior is beating up. Maybe he was like actually saving his cooldown for this boss here. Oh. No, I'm silenced. How do I break that? Oh, I have to get my weapon, of course. There we go. Dumb me. My keyboard is really acting weird up right now. I'm gonna use this. Oh, I'm stunned now. Oh, I wonder what I did wrong. I guess I did some... Oh, I was supposed to like get far away. Oh, I see. Well, again, I was doing good damage, but I didn't know actually that... I didn't know that thing where I had to like run far away. My bad. But still, we managed to do quite good damage. And we actually got some better items there. Not bad. Boom, 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 boom. Overpower, Mortal Strike. And this is one of the bad things with single button assistant, that it just basically used one of my strong cooldowns against a mob that was just about to die. Which is like, why are you doing that to me? Why are you doing that to me? I think this time here I'm not going to be doing the full dungeon, because I feel like after 1 or 2 bosses you kind of get... I mean, you already should now see what it kind of feels like. Doing great damage, definitely, and we have way more overview of what is going on. Like, what are we actually doing, if you know what I mean. So, where are we going? Some great damage. Boom, 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 boom. And you can see the damage meter down there. This one here, the Fury Warrior, actually beat us. I don't even know if we're going the right direction. So much bleeding damage on all of them. We try see if we could look at my damage. Most damage comes from Demolish, Cleave, my back, And Mortal Strike, Slam, Overpower, and then of course we have all the bleedings below. But still, like a lot of like nice passive damage coming from bleed. Where's the tank? Alright, let's get out some damage. I'm gonna save my avatar because the boss is just around the corner, so let's save that one for now. Still managed to do very, very nice damage. Oh god. This is the boss that actually can take some while. There we go. Let's use Avatar, which gives us Recklessness. The tank went AFK, not a problem. I don't care about that one. So very nice. But of course, that's not it. That's not it. But I'm fighting very closely with the Arcane Mage on who's dealing most damage. But I mean, Arcane Mage is such a meta spec right now. He's doing so much damage. At least we are leading over the Fury Warrior, for now at least. Alright. And then the last one here, let's see if we can somehow climb up the leaderboard. Well, at least dealing most damage. Gotta move out of that using this one here, Heroic Leap, to get out of it. Another good example on how to use it. Okay. Arcane Mage still managed to do quite more damage, but I mean, we still managed to be like top, well, second, which is quite nice. So we're just gonna leave now. I usually used to like do the full like dungeon run, but I feel like those two bosses is enough for you to see how I would play it in action. And I mean, honestly, I'm impressed. I feel like it was quite nice. So I could definitely see myself playing this build here. I'm just letting you know, I think the next expansion for World of Warcraft is going to release in, what is it called, like February, March. I haven't gotten told anything from Blizzard. I just feel like it's going to come out there. Once we actually get the next expansion, Arms Warrior is going to change a little bit. For example, Mastery is only going to increase the damage you deal to targets with, like, a lot of things is changing for Arms Warrior, in also in a good way. So you can of course still use this build here for the next, what is that, like 4 or 5 months. But then after that, Arms Warrior is getting a really, really deserved revamp, I would say. So yeah. But that was, let's just go look quickly here. That was the intro, the stats, the talents, rotation, gameplay. And now we're going to do a summary for everyone who just wanted to skip to the end of the video and just learn everything very quickly. Alright, let's do this summary. You maybe have watched the entire video and you just still here for a quick summary, or you might skip the entire video to just jump to the summary. All good. So let's talk about the spec here for just like 3 minutes, everything you need to know. First of all, we have the stats here. What I always recommend is going with the highest upgrade level. That means, for example, in this case here, for example, my shoulders are veteran. You can see upgrade level veteran. That means I would never pick another shoulder that was either explore or adventure, like you can see here, like a lower upgrade level. I would always now go with veteran. Because veteran gives so much more main stat, strength, which is just going to increase your damage by a lot. Like strength is really like an important stat. So that basically means I would never go down to explore or adventure, but I would always stay on veteran. Now you might ask, what about secondary stats? That's the thing. When you get an item that is the same upgrade level as the item you already have now, for example, if I got another pair of shoulders that was veteran, then we could look at secondary stats. But if I, for example, got another pair of shoulders that was champion, hero, myth, which is higher than veteran, I would not even look at secondary stats. I would just pick it because it's going to give me so much more main stat as the strength. So that's basically it. Always go with the highest upgrade level. It doesn't matter where it says 1 out of 8 and so on. Just go with the one that has the highest upgrade level, because you can always upgrade it yourself up to 8 out of 8. Then, after we have the stats, the secondary stats, critical strike should be the one you always should main for first. Well, it's the most important one because we have so many talents that is increasing our critical strike damage on a lot of the spells and increasing our critical strike chance. So, crit is just omega. Like it's such a good thing. Like I can talk about like for a long time why crit is good, but it's just very good. Crit also works perfectly nice with haste. Haste is reducing cooldown on one of 3 of our important abilities. Basically when you have an ability that has a green cooldown, like this one here, like Mortal Strike, it reduces the cooldown with more haste. It also reduces on cleave and thundering clap, which is our main AoE ability when it comes to spreading rend. It also reduces the global cooldown, which is we have higher because we're using single button assistant. It will increase the attack speed of your weapon, and it increases the tick rate of your bleedings, and it just makes the entire rotation more smooth. It's just like super nice. So critical strike and haste, like if you could get an item with the highest upgrade level and it both has critical strike and haste, that is perfect. Then after that, you have Mastery. Mastery just increases the damage you deal to. So basically, first it applies a bleeding. Whenever you use Mortal Strike, Warbreaker, Cleave, or Bladestorm, it inflicts a bleeding called Deep Wounds, which deals 300k damage. But then the more Mastery you have, the more damage the target that has Deep Wound on takes damage from you. So right now you can see it takes 27% damage because I had 27% Mastery. But this is why Mastery isn't that important, because Mastery doesn't directly impact how much the bleeding that bleeding deals damage. It just increases how much damage you deal to that target when it has your bleed on them. But it just like for each percent, it just increases the damage you deal to them. It's basically the same as versatility, because versatility is also just increasing the damage you do and decreasing the damage you take. So I mean, I don't really see the biggest difference here. Of course, then Mastery also gives the bleeding, but I mean, the Mastery itself doesn't really increase the damage of that bleeding. So yeah, you get my point. So that's why crit, haste, very important. Mastery, versatility, fine. Versatility, if you want to be more tanky and be able to take more damage yourself, that's very nice in case you want to do like solo content. Besides that, let's just very quickly close here. Besides that, we have 2 talent specs. Very close, very fast. I'm going to go through them. We have the dungeon build, which is using Colossus here. This is the build we're going to be using for leveling, dungeon, delves, basically anything that is not raid. Then we also have a raid build, which is the one we're using in raids. This build here is way more like dealing damage to the current target you have. So this is using this one here. The only difference in active spells is that the dungeon build doesn't use spell reflection, it uses shockwave, and the raid build is using spell reflection and not shockwave, because we don't have like a lot of mobs we need to stun at the same time. Where in the dungeon build we had one more, like I'm sacrificing spell reflection to get second wind. I just love second wind. I think it's one of the best self-healing abilities in the game. So that's why most players, they have taken not second wind and take spell reflection, but I don't want to do that. I want second wind. So that's up to you if you want to play with spell reflection or second wind, but I just love second wind. But again, the dungeon build is for a build you should be using for all content in the game. The raid build is only for raid bosses, like single target bosses and so on. The rotation, everything down here is the same, except in the raid build, I am having a spell reflection on this button here, and in the dungeon build, I have shockwave here. Rotation is very simple. You just always have to keep up battle shout. You know, make sure that battle shout is always on you and all your party members. So it's on for like 60 minutes. So you basically only have to use it in the start of a dungeon or raid. After that, you're going to be using charge, which is going to give you 20 rage. Then you're going to be using avatar, and then you're going to spam 1. So the rotation is going to look like charge, avatar, spam 1. And now you just lean back and, you know, watch the rotation really go through. It's going to use all the cooldowns here. As you can see, charged, avatar, thunderclap, sweeping strike, thunderous roar, ravager, and then it uses warbreaker, and then our strongest demolish ability, and it just kind of like goes through your normal rotation. So yeah, very, very nice. And now after you don't have any other cooldowns, you just spam 1, 1, 1, 1, and it doesn't even matter if you like change your target, you know, because yeah, it wouldn't affect it that much. Then, of course, we have 3 interrupt abilities in the dungeon build. We have Pummel, Shockwave, and Stormbolt. Pummel and Stormbolt only interrupted the target you're attacking, whereas Shockwave is interrupting everyone in front of you. We also have the Charge. We also have Heroic Leap to get out of bad situations. We also have a Pending Victory to do some self-heal. It basically heals 30% of your maximum health, which is insane. We have Heroic Throw, if you want to like cast like an attack on an enemy like far away. Your single button rotation is actually also using it, but I just like to have it binded in case I want to use it. We also have Berserker Rage, which is going to get you out of fear, sap, and some incapacitate abilities. We also have Die by Sword, which is reducing all damage taken by 30%, and you increase your parry chance by 100. We also have Rallying Cry, which is increasing your HP and all your party members by 10%. Then, of course, we had our 2 stuns and a hamstring that makes an enemy run slower. That's basically it. That was the stats, rotation, talents, and basically what you need to know. Again, if you want to learn more about the spec here, I also, of course, have the full video you're watching right now. And I also have a 10-minute version of this video as well on my channel, in case for like audience who wants like shorter guides, but still a bit more info than just this summary part here. So yeah. So what can I say? Thanks for watching, everyone. It was a pleasure. I know it's been a bit while since I've made a guide, but that's because I was just 4 days in Poland for like an event, like a business event, my full-time job. But now I'm back and doing guides again. So thanks for watching. Always fun hanging out with all of you. And yeah, in case you want to like get, you know, my talents, my UI, my builds, anything, all of it is on my Discord. Thanks for watching. And again, if you want to support the channel even further, feel free to, you know, subscribe, like, and even become a YouTube member. That, you know, helps as well. Thanks for watching. Peace out.